I've seen firsthand the difference that makes, and so has Keir. We grew up in different ends of the country and at different times. Not too different. But we endured the same insecurities and hardship that so many working people face. I guess the one difference is, though, I had to endure it as a ginger. So I've got one up there.
A very warm welcome to UK Post Tug. Please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you do not miss the latest updates and breaking political news from Westminster and across the entire United Kingdom. Angela Rayner is preparing to launch an absolutely explosive and potentially devastating battle against Sir Keir Starmer after the government dramatically watered down her flagship workers' rights laws that she spent years developing, championing, and fighting for before her shocking and highly controversial resignation from the cabinet. The former Deputy Prime Minister, who was once considered the second most powerful person in the entire Labour government, personally championed Labour's ambitious and far-reaching employment rights bill before she was forced to resign from her cabinet position back in September amid mounting political pressures and growing tensions with No. 10 Downing Street. But last week, the government made the stunning and deeply contentious announcement that it would scrap a key and absolutely fundamental part of the bill that would have given workers crucial protection against unfair dismissal from their very first day in the job. This represented one of the most significant and popular elements of Labour's so-called New Deal for working people that the party had repeatedly promised to deliver during the general election campaign and had featured prominently in their manifesto. Instead of implementing this day-one protection as originally promised, planned, and committed to, this vital protection will now only come into force after 6 full months of employment, a change that has sparked absolute fury and bitter disappointment among trade unions, workers' rights advocates, and left-wing MPs who feel utterly betrayed by what they see as a fundamental breach of Labour's election promises. Government ministers who have found themselves on the defensive and scrambling to justify this controversial climb-down said the embarrassing U-turn was absolutely essential in order to prevent the entire bill being completely blocked in the House of Lords by Conservative peers and crossbench lords who have made clear their fierce opposition to significant elements of the proposed legislation. The government argued that compromising on this particular provision was necessary to save the rest of the bill and ensure that at least some workers' rights reforms could be delivered. But angry unions and passionate left-wing MPs have condemned the U-turn as a devastating betrayal of working people and a capitulation to conservative pressure and business lobbying. And now, in what promises to be one of the most dramatic and politically significant parliamentary confrontations of this entire parliament, Ms. Rayner is preparing to take on the government directly in her first major intervention and public challenge since her resignation from the cabinet in September. She will push aggressively and determinedly for part of the workers' rights bill to be brought in sooner than the government currently plans, setting up a potentially explosive showdown between the former Deputy Prime Minister and her former cabinet colleagues, including Sir Keir himself. The former Deputy Prime Minister is preparing to table a significant parliamentary amendment seeking to have the new protections apply from 2026 rather than 2027, as is currently planned and scheduled by the government. This would represent a full year earlier than ministers have committed to and would demonstrate that Labour backbenchers are prepared to challenge their own government over what they see as unnecessary delays and deliberate foot-dragging on delivering promised reforms. She and former Minister Justin Madders, who also resigned from government positions and shares her passionate commitment to workers' rights, are understood to have been speaking extensively to MPs and union colleagues as they prepare the amendment together and build support for their challenge. A close ally of Ms. Rayner said with obvious determination and defiance, "As key architects of the bill, they know it inside and out. They will be spearheading efforts to ensure the best possible package of reform is delivered and implemented to an ambitious timeline. They are expected to work with Labour colleagues to push for further commitments from ministers." This statement makes absolutely clear that Ms. Rayner and her supporters are not simply going to accept the government's watered-down version of the legislation without a serious fight, and are prepared to use their detailed knowledge of the bill and their relationships with trade unions to mount a significant challenge. The pair are set to argue forcefully and persuasively that because the change is now merely a reduction of the existing qualifying period of 2 years down to 6 months, the lengthy time set out for widespread consultation and for employers to familiarize themselves with the new requirements is no longer needed or justified. They will contend that employers have already had years to prepare for day one protections since Labour announced this policy long before the general election campaign, and that further delays are simply unnecessary and designed to appease business interests at the expense of working people who desperately need these protections. The two backbenchers, who have emerged as leading voices for the left of the Labour Party since leaving government, will also push aggressively for workers on controversial zero-hour contracts not to be locked out of the new rights that the bill proposes. Zero-hour contracts, which do not guarantee any minimum hours of work and leave workers in precarious employment situations without predictable incomes or job security, have become increasingly common across the British economy and affect millions of workers in sectors ranging from hospitality and retail to care work and warehousing. Ms. Rayner and Mr. Madders will argue that these vulnerable workers deserve the same protections as those on traditional employment contracts, and that excluding them would create a dangerous two-tier system. Additionally, they will make sure that employers face meaningful fines if they deliberately stop trade unions from talking to workers about their rights and the benefits of union membership. This provision is particularly important to the trade union movement, which has seen membership decline over decades and faces systematic obstacles in many workplaces where employers actively discourage or prevent union organizing activities. Strong enforcement mechanisms with real financial penalties are seen as essential to ensuring that workers can actually access their new rights in practice rather than just on paper. A well-placed source close to the discussions said there was considerable anger among Labour MPs that a manifesto pledge had been blocked by unelected peers in the House of Lords, but also a growing consensus that parts of the bill could be implemented faster to benefit working people. This suggests that Ms. Rayner's challenge may attract significant support from Labour backbenchers who are frustrated with the government's apparent willingness to compromise on key manifesto commitments under pressure from the Lords and business groups. One Labour MP directly involved in the ongoing discussions said with obvious frustration and determination, "This cannot be the thin end of the wedge, and we will not let it be." This comment reveals deep concerns among Labour MPs that accepting this particular compromise might encourage the House of Lords to block or water down other elements of the bill, and that the government might develop a habit of backing down whenever faced with opposition from Conservative peers or business lobbying. These MPs are determined to draw a line and make clear that they will fight to defend the core promises that Labour made to working people during the election campaign. Other Day One rights relating to parental leave and sick pay are still set to go ahead as originally planned, coming into effect in April 2026. However, the fact that the unfair dismissal protections have been delayed has raised fears that other provisions might also be weakened or postponed if the government continues to face pressure from the House of Lords and business organisations. Elsewhere in Parliament, Labour MP Andy MacDonald has brought forward his own parliamentary plans to restore all Day One rights to the bill as it continues to undergo detailed scrutiny and extensive debate in both houses of Parliament. He has tabled a formal motion to disagree with the House of Lords amendments that removed the unfair dismissal rights from the bill, setting up a potential constitutional confrontation between the elected House of Commons and the unelected upper chamber over who should have the final say on implementing manifesto commitments. Mr. MacDonald, the MP for Middlesbrough and Thornaby East, who has a long history of championing workers' rights and supporting trade union causes, said with passion and conviction, "This amendment restores the bill to the version previously agreed by the Commons. It protects the general election manifesto commitment to Day One unfair dismissal rights. I have tabled it because the unelected House of Lords should not be able to undermine a central pledge that our party has repeatedly reaffirmed. The Lords' changes would weaken the rights proposed in the manifesto and risk entrenching insecurity for workers, contrary to the New Deal for working people." He continued forcefully, "Trade unions need partners in Parliament, Labour MPs who are prepared not just to vote for the New Deal for working people, but to defend it, make the case for it, and challenge any attempt to water it down. This statement represents a clear warning to government ministers that they cannot take the support of Labour backbenchers for granted, and that MPs who are committed to workers' rights are prepared to rebel if they believe the government is betraying its election promises. The brewing confrontation between Ms. Rayner and the government represents one of the most significant internal Labour battles since the party came to power with its landslide victory. The former Deputy Prime Minister remains an enormously popular figure among trade unions, left-wing party members, and many Labour MPs who see her as a genuine champion of working people who rose from humble beginnings to reach the highest levels of government. Her willingness to challenge Sir Keir directly over workers' rights could embolden other Labour backbenchers to take more independent positions and push the government to stick more closely to its manifesto commitments. The government now faces a deeply uncomfortable choice between accepting Ms. Rayner's amendments and potentially facing further challenges from the House of Lords and business groups, or rejecting the amendments and risking a significant rebellion from its own backbenchers that would expose deep divisions within the Labour Party. Either way, this battle over workers' rights threatens to dominate parliamentary proceedings in the coming weeks and could prove to be one of the defining moments of this Labour government's first term in office. That concludes today's comprehensive look at Angela Rayner's explosive challenge to Keir Starmer over watered-down workers' rights laws. Make sure to like this video if you support stronger protection.